Welcome to Vivid Vibes Podcast, where we talk about information for your soul's vibration. I'm Jada.
And I'm Laura.
And today we'll be talking about shadow work.
So shadow work, it sounds kind of dark.
It
but
can.
Yes, it definitely can, but it's not always that dark. To me, shadow work just simply implies something about yourself that you don't know. Jada, what does shadow work mean to you?
To me, shadow work is looking at the dark parts of yourself, like your fears and your worries and your pain, and it's shining your light on those parts of yourself and saying, what can these parts of me teach me, and how can I embrace them as a part of myself rather than pushing them away? How can I love this part of myself?
Beautiful. That is exactly what I think a lot of people need to be addressing, is we automatically want to reject that which is in us that doesn't feel good. But you're right in saying that. Like, how do we shine light on that? How do we give it its proper attention to understand it rather than ignoring it?
Right. Like, a lot of emotions that most people hold or carry are resentment and anger and sadness and worry. So I guess maybe let's start today with some examples of shadow work that we've gone through, and then maybe we can get into some methods of how people can do some shadow work on their own.
Excellent. Yes.
So you were telling me earlier about an experience that you had while you were reading tarot. So Laura reads tarot cards at a lot of local bars and kava bars and things like that. And you want to tell them about this experience?
So I was at this restaurant / tavern. It's a wonderful place to go to, and I enjoy doing tarot reading there. And I usually have really fantastic responses from the people that I read cards for there. However, I had one particular person that came to me, and they were flat out telling me, oh, I don't believe in all this, but I'll do it for shits and giggles. And I even told this person, all right, well, if you've never done this before, I don't do future telling with my tarot. It's not about showing you what's to come. It's about showing you what you may need new advice or new perspective on in your life currently. And so I did a short reading for this person because I didn't want to get too far into it with them not being totally open to it to begin with. But anywho, we read the cards, and it was indicating, okay, you have a shining new opportunity for yourself, and right now the energy is good to just go for it. The only thing that might be stopping you is yourself. And so then after I did that reading and explained the cards to him in that way, we discussed a little bit more, and he revealed to me how, okay, I had a new job opportunity present itself, and he was debating on whether or not to go for it. And I reiterated it, like, well, the cards say now is a great time for you to move on that. Go for it. What's holding you back? And he's telling me, like, oh, well, what if it doesn't work out? Blah, blah, blah. And he's doubt. And I was trying after that. I was like, well, okay, that's a fear. Doubt is a fear.
Right.
And then he's like, no, but fear is an illusion. I don't believe in fear. Fear's not real. So I don't have any fear. Literally telling me he doesn't have any fear as he's continuing to tell me about things that are fears that he's not acknowledging. He's not acknowledging that he has fears that are dictating his decisions because he is in the mindset of believing that fear isn't real. And I do agree that to an extent, fear is just, it's a mindset. So it's not entirely a real thing, but it still is present within all of us. It dictates a lot of things for us. What we do and what we don't do is based off of fear. And fear has a purpose, though. Fear develops within all of us as a means of protecting us from something, whether it's emotional pain or whatever, what have you. It's totally independent and takes many shapes.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's such a huge game changer to be able to find stillness within yourself and let those feelings of fear come up and befriend the fear. Say, fear, I see you. Like, I see that you're here. I know that you're just trying to protect me. And then maybe saying, what are you here to teach me? What are you trying to teach me? Because it's from that place, when you learn what the fear is teaching you, that you can either say, okay, I'll listen to this, I'll move with this, or you'll choose the vibration of love. And that's knowing that you have the capability within you to listen to your truth and follow your heart. And if you want that fear to take a back seat, still invite it to come up, feel it, befriend it, and then say, I don't think I need you in this situation, fear. Actually, I know I don't need you in this situation, and I'm ready to move forward because I know what's best for me.
Oh, I agree 100%. That is all any of us can really learn to do, is how do we learn how to accept it instead of rejecting it.
Totally.
So, Jada, you
Yes?
were also showing me this wonderful exercise earlier that I think could be a very useful tool for a lot of our listeners if they wanted to try their hand at this. You want to explain about that?
Yeah, totally. So I actually learned about this exercise in a book called Millionaire Success Habits by Dean Graziosi. And the exercise is called 7 Levels Deep. And basically you ask a question, like Laura and I were doing this exercise to figure out the purpose of our podcast. It's a great exercise to do based on figuring out a why when you're trying to achieve a goal. But Laura had the idea to take this exercise and use it on your fear or a shadow or a negative emotion. Well,
Yeah, well, any
I
of those.
say negative emotion, but that's a whole other like an emotion.
Right.
That
Why do you feel what you feel in general? though?
Right. So an example of this would be, I asked Laura why she wanted to start Vivid Vibes podcast, and she said to inform the masses. And I said, why do you want to inform the masses? And she said, for the masses to become more self-aware. So basically, you'll just continue with that, asking a why from the question before, with a total of 7 answers. So around the 4th or the 5th question, you're going to notice that you're getting from your headspace down into your heart and getting out of the ego, I guess, and more into the soul. And
It definitely does get challenging.
yeah, and the last answer that Laura came to was, because to grow is the purpose of life. So it really got much deeper than, why do you want to start a podcast? Laura's purpose in starting this podcast was to spread the message that to grow is the purpose of life.
Yes.
So if we did this with an emotion, it would really get us out of our headspace and into our heart.
Right. And I think, so our listeners can apply this to fear. So everybody has their own unique fears, as like, okay, are you afraid of being alone or being rejected? Maybe start with that. Like, start with why, okay, what are you afraid of? Identify it. Then, like, okay, so why are you afraid of being alone, if that is one that you start with? Okay. And then you just kind of build off of that. You go on and on. And it's going to be different for everybody, of course, when you kind of go down the list. And it's supposed to be challenging, though. It's supposed to bring up more things that you might not be consciously aware of. And I think that's a great tool for to become more self-aware.
How about we provide a worksheet for this in our Facebook group?
I love that idea. Yes. Yes.
So we had the idea recently to start a Facebook community so that everybody can join in on conversations about these episodes, and we can all just show up for each other and support each other. We will have a link for you guys very soon, but yeah, exciting stuff.
Activities.
So getting back to shadow work and kind of digging into those deep parts of yourself, I kind of just want to touch on, how difficult it was for me to embrace the dark parts of myself.
Yes.
So about I'd say about 5 years ago, I was living in Orlando, and I had a lot of anxiety, I had depression, I felt heavy a lot of the time, and I was trying to numb these feelings with different things, with toxic relationships, with alcohol, with just all these different numbing agents. And I realized that I was carrying all of these heavy emotions, but I didn't understand that I could embrace those and integrate those as a part of me. I kind of just like pushed them down. And that's around the time that I was learning about like positive affirmations and things like that. And I didn't know what spiritual bypassing was at that time, but I was just pushing all of this stuff down and like saying my positive affirmations and things. And don't get me wrong, like they did help. But because I wasn't doing that shadow work, because I wasn't integrating my shadow self, I saw time and time again where those issues came up for me. So, Laura, what are some methods that you would suggest, I guess, that would help people to look at their shadows and grow from them and to accept them?
Well, reflecting inwardly. I think that's the biggest thing, at least in my personal experience, that ultimately that reveals your shadows. And I think being present with yourself is one of the most difficult tasks an individual can do. And I think anybody that feels any like prominent negative emotions, or what they perceive to be as negative emotions, has that as a challenge, that they don't essentially want to be present with themselves. They don't like themselves. They don't necessarily understand why they don't like themselves. And that kind of goes back to that exercise where you can do that little question, like asking, why is it bad? What aspect of yourself are you uncomfortable with? You're not happy with? Because, I mean, ultimately, there's a common one. People are insecure with their body images, like if they feel they're overweight, or they, their boobs aren't big enough or something. Like it's different for everyone, of course. But ultimately we have to challenge ourselves, like thinking, because I have to give an example with myself growing up to really put this more clearly. I am not a small, tiny little girl, and I never have been. I kind of hit puberty at a very young age. And from then, my insecurities were not just with my body image, but that because I looked older than everybody, like in my age group, like I felt people were going to look at me like I'm dumb. Like, oh, what's that large child doing in that grade with all those other smaller children? She must have something wrong with her. That was such a huge heaviness on my mind that I just simply wasn't conscious of. That was the fact. That was a lot of my insecurities, was just being afraid to feel dumb. So I always forced myself to be, I needed to have A's in my classes, even if it wasn't necessarily pushed on me, because my mom was very supportive and, she gave me love and, things are going to work out. But ultimately I had to push myself to excel so that I wouldn't give in to that fear of feeling dumb. And as I got older, even out of school, I graduated. That's not really a thing anymore as into my adulthood. I kind of got into not healthy relationships. When I was 18, I started dating a 29-year-old. And that was me feeling like I'm on the same level as him. Look at this. And me not recognizing that at the time. But, it was an ego boost for me. Look at me. I got this older guy. Woo.
Right.
And then that didn't work out. We broke up after 3 years or so. And I had to learn more about myself. Like, oh my gosh, I felt like I outgrew him and he was older. What does that mean? I had to force myself to really think more deeply as to why did I even do that? Why did I get involved with a guy like that to begin with? What was my problem? And that was a thing too, that I felt like there was something wrong with me. So I had to think more on that too. And then the next relationship I got with was like the most severely emotionally abusive relationship I've ever been in. And we weren't together for more than a year, but I did get pregnant. I had a kid. And once my son was 3 months old, I decided to leave his father because I finally realized something that I had not before. And that was like, even on my own, if I feel like I'm dumb and I'm worthless and I'm not worthy of this, now it's not just me. Now there's another tiny person that I'm responsible for, that I love and care for dearly, that is in the picture. He is now learning the habits of this other person that is treating me badly. That was a big wake-up call for me to become more aware of things I was not fully acknowledging. And that's when it did become clear, like, oh, I've had issues with feeling dumb. So I got into a relationship where I thought somebody else had more information that could help guide me or lead me. And I was unconscious to that.
And they were validating your belief that you were dumb.
Oh, they were. They treated me like garbage. They treated me like a child, but I was looking up to them like they knew more than I did. Ultimately, I finally learned that no, they did not.
Yeah.
But that was a big thing for me to go through. And it's hard for me to come up with a concrete answer as to somebody else. If you're not having a kid, of course, like, what do you go through to become more aware? How do you, well, again, I would suggest potentially hypnosis, because that also down the road, several years after my son was born, I discovered that hypnosis was very, very helpful, because at that point I had my first 2 past life regressions, and seeing those past lives also made things clear, like, oh, I have an affinity for Victorian clothing. Like, I like that style. Oh, because I had a lifetime that was very nice in the 1800s. And also another thing that became clear to me was I saw my baby's father in a past life where he in that lifetime was very abusive, even much more so in that lifetime. And he ultimately had killed me in that previous lifetime. That made me understand myself a little more too. Like, oh, I fell into almost like a karmic, energetic pattern again until I could see what I needed to see from this. How do I heal those old wounds?
So how did you become aware of the fact that you had this belief that you were dumb and that you needed to have someone else like validate that almost? Like, when did you become aware of that?
When I had the past life regression.
So it was hypnosis that brought that shadow to light for you.
Right. Because the same past life that I was just mentioning where my baby's father had killed me, that one was in the 1920s in the Great Depression. And before I had met him, my upbringing in that lifetime, very poor. Very, very, very poor. Dust Bowl. We had nothing. Me and my family had hardly any clothing but scraps. No shoes. Zero education. I did not know how old I was even into my adulthood because no one kept track with that. No one could count. Like, we were that dumb. Well, I say dumb. I shouldn't even say that. We were just that uneducated in that time. And for me, my experience in recalling that, it was that feeling of, feeling so low, so poor, so uneducated, giving me that low self-esteem. My family, even my parents, or my father in particular in that lifetime, was very abusive. So you kind of learn that that's the way.
So it was like, by seeing this past life during hypnosis, it made things in your modern life make sense.
It did.
So I've done a past life regression with you before. And afterwards, whenever we hear things like past life regression, hypnosis, it's like our logical mind wants to make sense of it.
Yeah.
And even while it was happening in my head, I was like, is this real? Like,
Yes.
And my comprehension around that, or the conclusion that I've come to, is that for me, it's real because my mind drew that picture. So whether it is like soul knowledge that I'm carrying with me, or whether it's a scene that my subconscious mind has created to make sense of the way things are happening today, whatever it is, it's for each person to decide. Like, it's for, and this is just for anyone who's listening, like, it's for each individual person to decide like what something like a past life regression truly is to them.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because no one is going to be able to plop into your head and see the same things you're seeing, and vice versa.
Totally. And there's so many different methods to allow your shadows to come up. So for me, meditation has been a huge help. For a lot of people, meditation is difficult, and they think, oh, well, I'm just going to sit down and I'm just going to stop thinking. Like, no, absolutely not. Meditation does not work like that. Like, if you think it works like that, you're wrong. It doesn't. So basically, meditation is learning how to surf, learning how to ride the waves. You're not stopping the waves. So you're letting your thoughts come and you're letting them go. I feel like I say this in every single episode, but it's just that finding that stillness in your center, that mindfulness in the present moment. Whenever I do find that stillness and I'm letting my thoughts come and I'm letting them go and I'm letting them come and I'm letting them go, then it's like a sink. Like, first everything is swirling around in the sink whenever you pull the drain out, and then the water level gets lower and lower and your thoughts become less and less. And the more you're meditating, the more space there is in between your thoughts. And then the mind starts to quiet. And for me, it's when the mind starts to quiet that something will just come up. So one example with meditation and shadow work is when I was on the self-love sale. It was this 8-day retreat in Greece, and we were on a boat, and I was having a great time. And I'd just taken a Dramamine because we were on this tiny boat. I was like eating Dramamine like it was candy, but and they make you kind of sleepy, so I took a lot of naps. What a life. So anyways, I'm sitting on the back of this boat on this little like couch thingy, and I kind of just start like getting in that half asleep, half awake state. And that's a meditative state.
Oh, it is.
When you're half asleep and half awake,
Right.
That's a lot of times, like if you've ever heard someone shout your name, they say that that's like when you're more connected to like spirit realm.
Right.
It's like when you're more in touch with spirituality because you've kind of dropped that ego a little bit because you're releasing into a relaxed state.
That is also a hypnotic state as well.
So it was like my intuition said to me, so I've had tension in my jaw for the last, I don't know, 3 years or so, 4 years. And something super clearly said to me, the tension in your jaw is resentment for your mother.
Oh.
Yeah. And I was like, what? I was just trying to nap. But
And then you get some heavy load on you right there.
Yeah, right? And, so I did my own work with that in taking a look at what I was holding on to, any feelings I was holding on to. And then I actually had an experience with you, Laura, where we were doing a past life regression, and I saw my mother, and I was able to see her in her element of being this nurturer and this caregiver, and it gives me goosebumps talking about it. I have goosebumps right now. But it really helped me reshape the way that I looked at my mom. And we all have experiences with our mothers where they have some type of pain or some type of trauma that they unconsciously project onto us. Every single person.
Oh, yeah.
Like, and I think as women especially, we have this experience with our mothers, you know?
Oh, yeah.
And it's not just personal traumas that they send to us, but it's like collective traumas that they send on to us from like patriarchal beliefs and things like that. But anyways, doing the past life regression really helped shift my perception on, like, it helped me understand, well, doing my own work, my own shadow work, looking at that feeling of like, why do I feel resentment? Then moving into a place of forgiveness. Then seeing my mom's light. It was like this beautiful process that helped me heal.
It sounds like you're like unveiling or removing a curtain after layer and layer until you get to the light.
Yeah, so before, one time I said like an onion, like peeling back layers like an onion, and my friend Sheree was like, artichokes have layers too and they're prettier, so like an artichoke.
Right. You know what, though, talking about your mothers, I had one that more recently occurred to me that was something I thought was so petty, but something like it actually made a lot of sense. My mom growing up always pressured me to, like, you know, you're not mature or responsible if you don't have your own vehicle. Like really pushed it, not necessarily verbatim like that, but the heavy push of, I am not independent if I don't have my own vehicle. Though as I'm getting older, I'm looking at, you know, climate change. So I kind of had it in my head, you know, it's okay if I don't have my own vehicle because it's better for the earth. I can carpool, or I'll take a bus or a taxi. You know, you have all these options, but to her it was not a valid option.
Yeah.
And then eventually I was driving. I finally got my own car again after a while of sharing vehicles. And it occurred to me with her, it was such a big trauma for her growing up. Her parents were not necessarily the healthiest. Her independence was challenged because they tried to have all this control over her. They tried to, she moved out when she was 17 because she was tired of the psychological and physical abuse of the situation. And to her freedom came with having her own car.
Oh, so it was like that lesson she was projecting onto you.
Yeah. And for me, it was a different perspective than it was for her, because now she's pushing this pressure on, I have to have my own car to be independent. I'm like, but money and environment and all these other things. No, I don't want this. But she's projecting that onto me. And it took a long time. Again, like, this was more like within the last year or so, and I'm 28 now, where I finally learned, like, oh, it was a challenge to her and her self-identity, and to her to have this car, not me. And for me to be able to detach that association was a huge light bulb going off in my head, and it changed the way I receive information from her, basically. Not in a way where I'm no longer putting up resistance when she says something about a car.
Totally. I completely get what you're saying about beliefs that your parents can hand down to you. Like, I feel like that's another thing we should touch on is,
oh yeah.
Yeah, like, how many of your beliefs are actually your beliefs? How many of the things that you believe and you tell yourself and you carry are actually someone else's? And it's a really good exercise, I think, to write down all of the things that you constantly tell yourself, all of the things that you believe. Like, for me, one of the big stories to deconstruct, kind of like deconstructing the box of what success is. That was a big one for me. And that's what's led to me starting this podcast with you, Laura.
Right.
Is being able to deconstruct what success looks like. So, from the time I was like 5 years old, I understood that my father went to college, came to Florida, and eventually got this, 6-figure income job where he could provide for our family.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had that story in my head. Go to college, get a good job, and live the life I want to live.
Right.
Actually, let me rewind on that a little bit. I grew up hearing the story, you better marry someone who's rich if you want to live the way that you like to live.
I think a lot of people have heard that or believe that
Yeah.
too.
And like, what? Why can't I be my own rich husband? But
Damn straight.
like Cher's mom told her she better marry a rich man. And she
And
said,
look at her.
she said, Mom, I am a rich man.
God bless Cher.
Yes. But anyways, so I had those stories playing in my mind about marriage and college and all these little to-do checklist things that I was supposed to check off to be, quote, successful. But then I started doing the things that were supposed to make me successful. And I didn't feel like it was aligned with my truth.
It didn't feel good, right?
No, I was in college for half a semester before I decided this ain't my jam.
Oh, yeah.
And that's not to say that college is not for some people, but what I'm getting at is that you know what your truth is.
Right.
And
And I went through a similar experience when I was in my senior year of high school. Now, mind you, I've been an artist my entire life, but I didn't have actual art classes till I was in high school. But I was still pretty good. So I was like all the art teachers, I was the teacher's pet, right? But I had teachers flat out telling me, okay, if you're not going to college for the arts, in computer graphics or designing, you know what, if you're going for traditional art, like painting, illustration, things like that, which at that point in time, that's what I would have gone for. They're like, there's no point. They're not going to teach you anything new. The only thing that's going to benefit you at the level I was at that point was making more connections. But for me, I was like, I did try to take college advancement courses, and I failed on the math portions because math is not my strong suit. So ultimately, I wasn't going to be getting I wasn't.
I just touched my face, and then I think Laura thought that I was saying that something was on her face, and she also touched her face like monkey see, monkey do. Okay, anyway,
sorry. But ultimately, I wasn't going to be getting into college on a free ride at that point.
Okay.
Not for what I wanted to do.
Right.
So I instantly was like, well, then what's the point? I don't want to go into debt doing something that I'm forcing myself to do that I don't want to actually be doing, because I'm not going to. I hated computer graphic design at the time because I had classes in high school on that, and I realized, okay, it's not for me. And so I wasn't going to put myself through that. But ultimately, it took me a while into my adulthood, trying to figure out, okay, well, if I'm not going to go for that, what other options do I have? Can I go back to school? I can go back to school whenever. It's going to cost an arm and a leg, but I still have that opportunity. It just depends on what I want to go for. Well, the rest of my family, they're all in the medical field, nurses, paramedics, and all that. And I'm like, just hearing stories from them, I'm like, well, that's not for me either. So what the hell am I going to do? And eventually, I had no idea. And I got really low again through my relationships I was involved in, being a new mom. I was like, well, now, especially being a new mom, I'm like, I don't have time for anything that's going to be consuming everything else, my energy, along with my mind, And when I finally had the hypnosis session, a really deep revelation came to me, because now it wasn't just getting in touch with my why I do what I do on a psychological level, but it was a big spiritual moment for me too, because I was now having deep conversations with spirit guides, seeing things beyond this world. That kind of opened so much for me. And my spirit guide came to me and told me what my purpose was. And they're like, your purpose is to teach. And at that point, I was not in the field. I was not like, who the hell am I to teach people? And I've, again, felt so dumb for so long.
You lost your connection with your light.
Right.
It sounds like you had this like calling to shine a light for other people, but because that light wasn't shining in your life, you thought, how can I shine this light for other people?
Right. But eventually, now, so that was a few years ago. And I've been on this path to try to figure out what the hell that meant. What the hell does that mean?
Right.
And that kind of snowballed into me thinking on things. And I say that so simply, like, just think. I'm like, but really, I had to just start, like, realizing, like, what does this mean? Well, what does that mean? And I'm in my head a lot, just thinking, snowballing, question after question, just going off of one of the other.
Why am I feeling this? Where is this coming from?
Right. And eventually, I finally have found what aligns with me, what feels good, and finding more consciousness, higher consciousness, self-awareness has been the ultimate tool for me to learn more, to feel like now I'm in a place where, oh, now I get what my spirit guide was telling me. Now I can talk about these things and help teach something.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Thanks.
I think a lot of the times whenever we have this calling to share our truth and to help other people, that's one of the main fears that comes up for people is I don't know. I don't know enough. I'm not in a place to teach because I don't know that. But the truth of the matter is, if you take a moment and you close your eyes and you think about where you were 2 or 3 years ago, what could you tell that version of yourself? What have you learned in the last 2 years? By showing up and telling people your truth, and even just saying it in the terms of like telling that past version of you, like, hey, it's okay. You're not alone. You are smart. You know,
Right.
like you do have this intuitive knowledge within you. By saying those things, you're helping someone else, because there is someone right now who's probably in a situation that you were in 2 years ago and needs to hear something that you needed to hear.
Yeah, I agree. And another thing, when I do my tarot card readings, it's so funny because I get a lot of people that come to me, and at the beginning they'll be like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm rambling about my problems. You don't want to hear this. And I'm like, girl, I'm sitting here talking to all kinds of strangers because I want to hear it.
Yes.
Because ultimately, I'm learning from their experiences too. If they're in a place of not knowing and the cards are coming up and saying something, I'm just interpreting it then. The cards are trying to inform you of something you don't know. And at the same time, through this telling you something, now I'm on the opposite end. Now I'm learning too.
Totally. Everyone is teaching us all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Like literally everyone. Even that guy who came to you.
The sphere.
Yeah, the guy who came to you for the tarot reading. Maybe at the time it didn't feel, you were like, okay, like get out of my motherfucking chair. But like
No, you're absolutely right though. I definitely had to learn, like, okay, this person, they're just not in a state of awareness yet to acknowledge what they don't know.
Totally.
And that's a big thing for everyone. We have to acknowledge that there is more than what we are consciously aware of. We have to push further beyond our own limits of discovering what we don't know that we don't know.
Yep. Like there's shit you know, shit you don't know, and shit you don't know you don't know.
That's right.
Now, kind of getting back to that version of your past self, I was actually laying in my bed last night doing a meditation, and sometimes I'll just like lay in Savasana, which for the non-yogis that are listening, that's literally just laying on your back with your palms facing up. It's very relaxing. That's called corpse pose. But anyways, so I was laying in Savasana, and sometimes I like to lay like that before I go to bed and just kind of let myself meditate, because I feel like when I'm laying on my back, I'm laying with like my heart open to the universe, you know, like
Yeah.
facing outer space.
Mm-hmm.
And and I was again just letting my thoughts come and letting them go and tuning into the feelings in my body. And I think I talked before about how we hold our issues in our tissues. So when I notice myself holding tension in my body, then I'll imagine sending my breath to those areas and feeling a release as I exhale. And then, as a method of shadow work, asking myself, what is this tension teaching me? And that's a little method that I came up with after the experience in Greece.
Ooh, I love it.
Thanks. So, so I was feeling into this tension in my body and asking my body, what is this tension teaching me? And I immediately flashed back to this version of myself when I lived in Orlando. And I used to get so blackout drunk when I lived in Orlando that I have had an Uber driver carry me into my house. I have thrown up in an Uber.
Oh, no.
I'm sorry to the Uber drivers of Orlando that you had to experience that time in my life. But I imagined looking at that version of me and saying, I love you and I accept you, and it's okay that you I'm
It's
crying
okay,
talking
Jada.
about this.
Love you.
Thanks, I love you too. But I imagined saying to this version of myself, like, I love you and I accept you. And that's a part of myself that I rejected for a really long time. And now I see that I needed to go through that because I needed all of the beautiful lessons that didn't seem so beautiful at that time and had a little too much vomit involved. And maybe a little too much tequila. But I needed all of those lessons to be the person I am today. And I would not be who I am today without those lessons. So now, instead of looking at that part of myself and feeling shame, I can look at that version of myself and say, thank you. Thank you to that part of myself, because I would not be sitting here on this podcast with you right now talking about this subject if I had never gone through that. So if you are at a time in your life where you're numbing your pain and you're pushing that part of you down, you're trying to bypass things, know that there is no part of you that is not worthy of love. There is no part of your soul that is beyond repair, and you're not broken. No matter how broken you feel, you are so perfectly whole exactly as you are right now.
I 100% agree with that. Oh my gosh, that was beautiful. Thank you for sharing that,
yes,
Jada.
Absolutely. And I just thought immediately after that happened, I was like, wow, thanks, universe. I'm going to talk about this on tomorrow's episode about shadow work.
Oh my gosh, you reminded me though, and I think I told you this a few weeks ago, how I had a big revelation, like on a kind of otherworldly level in my own home. Basically, I've been going through struggles within the last year of the new home we moved in last summer. And the energy of the place just kind of bogged me down. It was hard for me to really do a lot of work or do too much in the house. I don't have a lot of people over just because I have not been very happy with just the feeling of my home. It didn't feel like my place, right? And I found myself not meditating as much as I used to as well. And I just got done watching a Teal Swan episode that was talking about integrating aspects of ourselves that we might not be acknowledging. Like there's the aspect of you that is anger. There's the aspect of you that is sad or protective or happy. And like, how do we combine all these pieces together? And she offered this wonderful exercise. And so I was like, after I finished it, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do that. I haven't meditated in a while. I'm going to sit down and do it myself and try this. And it was pretty late at night though. So I was about to go right to bed and just try it out for myself. And what I found, as soon as I closed my eyes and I was trying to get into that meditative state, I often visualize my spirit guide to be like the first thing that comes to mind. And that's going to be the thing that like shows me, oh, okay, I'm there. I'm in the zone. And at first I saw what appeared to be the body of my spirit guide, but then she turned her face in my mind's eye, and the face was not my spirit guide. It was this very contorted, frightening face. And then I was like, I immediately opened my eyes because I was scared. I was like, what the hell is this? I opened my eyes and I was terrified for a moment. Like, what have I done? I'm meditating. Am I opening a door? Is this thing in my home? What is this thing doing in my home, right? Because in case our viewers didn't know, or listeners didn't know, I also do paranormal investigation. So I'm very protective about making sure things don't get into my home when I don't want them to. So to see this, to visualize this in my mind, and to recognize that, oh, this is in my home. Oh God, what have I done? I'm freaking out. And I shut all that off like immediately, and I fell asleep, and I didn't think about it again until I woke up, and I was like, I didn't dream. I was not addressing this. But then I took the moment in the morning to I do this conscious meditation where my eyes are still open, but I'm zoning out. I am in the zone. I am now tapping into things beyond what is presently in front of me. And I was trying to figure out what that thing was. And the knowledge finally came to me. It took like half a day for me to like get all the pieces together. But ultimately, I've discovered that this thing that I was frightened of was still an extension of myself, an extension of my spirit guide, not what I'm used to, not this loving light being, but basically the flip side of the coin, the shadow aspect of my spirit guide. And I'd never even known it was there. I never knew this whole time this entity had been in my home, contributing to that heavy energy that I didn't like, that I didn't want. But now I didn't mean to, but I came face to face with it, and it scared the hell out of me. But then I had to think about, okay, how do I get out of the space of fear? Why is it there? Because ultimately, even it has a function. And the knowledge came to me finally that it is just that. It's the shadow aspect that I have not acknowledged, that I still need to acknowledge, because even still, I would not have learned everything that I needed to learn by being in that home, feeling those feelings, reflecting on the things I had to reflect on because I was in a state of being uncomfortable. It was forcing me out of my own comfort zone to expand my awareness and my knowledge even further. And when I realized that, like, that was the purpose of that entity being there present with me, I no longer had a space of being fearful of it. I was like looking at it in a totally new light. I'm like, you have just as much purpose as any light being there is. You are trying to help be this force that shows me or made me feel new things, to teach me more. And at that point, I remember I was getting teary-eyed. I think I was driving, and I was like, oh gosh, I need to stop, because even I'm getting like teary-eyed at the idea of like, I addressed this thing with so much fear and almost immediate resentment and resistance. Mm-hmm. When I finally took the moment the next morning to reflect on it and no longer resist it, but to get to understand it, I understood a lot more about my own personal experiences because of these forces that are beyond us, that are still acting in our favor. Again, it's not all just light beings out there. Our spirit guides are multifaceted beings that are a very complex subject to unfold.
Yeah, maybe later on we'll get more into spirit guides. Spirit guides is a loaded subject.
It is. But for me on this personal level, seeing the flip side, seeing the light and the shadow aspect of this was so important for me to release this negative feeling that I had towards just my environment, my home. And now since then, my home's felt a hell of a lot better.
Yeah.
And now I've had this mindset of abundance and opportunity and new things happening because, again, I was able to release that. And all of it's coming to me now, and it's been wonderful.
Yeah, and kind of like what you were saying with your spirit guide and the darker part of your spirit guide, and you immediately reacting with fear and resistance. we almost do that with ourselves and with other people.
Yes.
Like, we see these traits or these qualities that we deem as undesirable or negative, and we want to just like shut those down. But if we're good vibes only and we're only focusing on the light, we're denying our humanness and we're denying someone else their humanness. Like, your shadows are part of what make you a human.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Especially like the past life regression work that I've discovered is like, okay, you get more than one shot to learn a lesson or two, but ultimately we decide to incarnate into our life to experience the human reality.
Right. And
There's-
we're learning.
Yeah. You can only experience pain in the physical form, like physical pain, of course, but like that shows you so much, that teaches so much, that reacts with the psyche so much.
Right. And ultimately, I think the theme of shadow work is being able to look at those painful experiences and those dark times in your life and say, what did this teach me? And then coming out the other side of that as a warrior.
Oh, yeah.
Rather than a victim.
Oh, yeah.
Because when you're in that victim mindset of life is happening to me, then you're going to stay in that low vibrational state. You're going to stay in that sadness. You're going to stay in that darkness. You're going to stay in the worry and the fear and all that. But when you look at those lessons in your life and you say, thank you, universe, for teaching me that, and you decide that life is happening for you, and I understand that might not be easy. There are some very dark and painful things that people go through. Absolutely.
Oh,
and like, there are things people go through that nobody should have to go through. But if you did go through something that you feel nobody should have to go through, or that you should have never gone through, I hope that one day you can find it in your heart to say, I am a warrior and I'm going to let this grow me rather than hold me back.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think about, I'm going to mention it again, the past life from the 1920s.
Mm-hmm.
That one, I died pretty young when I got killed in that lifetime. And the whole life in and of itself sucked. It really did. There was very few happy moments in that. And I look at that and I'm identifying that as a past life of myself. But even if I'm looking at it like that was not me, that was a separate person going through those experiences. Like that was this hardship that this individual went through. Me at where I'm at now, I can look at that and learn so much from that story being told. So sometimes putting yourself in an outsider perspective. So say you are going through some really, really heavy stuff right now and really painful things. It's not necessarily fair that it has to be you, but at the same time, who out there is witnessing your story and is growing and expanding and being this essential part of the universe to help everything grow and expand, because now we're learning from these hardships.
Totally. Well, I think we touched on a lot today.
I think we did. This is kind of heavy but beautiful. I love this.
Just like shadow work.
Yeah. Hey.
Heavy but beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for tuning in today, guys, on our episode about shadow work. If you could pop over to the iTunes store and leave us a review and a comment, it would mean the world to us. Also, we will update you all soon on our Instagram at Vivid Vibes Podcast and on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Vivid Vibes Podcast, on info about how you can join our Vivid Vibes Tribe community. Thank you so much, guys. Namaste.
Namaste.